Dear listeners, a new day and a new story to discuss. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that interests me. Listen and write down what you think about this situation. I'm interested in your opinions. Sweat trickled down my spine, my hands clammy as if I dipped them in the ocean. The church, once a sanctuary of peace, now felt like a shrinking cage. I stood there, at the altar, my suit itching like 1,000 ants marching over my skin. The air was thick, heavy with expectation and the scent of lilies and incense. Damn it all, I muttered under my breath. Thoughts, doubts, fears, they were a tempest in my mind, but one thought thundered louder than the rest. Am I really doing this? The organ erupted into the wedding march, a sound meant to be joyful, now seeming like the toll of a doomsday bell. I glanced around. The pews were packed with a sea of faces, friends, family, acquaintances, some I barely knew. Their smiles were expectant, some genuine, others painted on just for the day. Cameras flashed, immortalizing my moment of doubt. "Everything okay, Matt?" whispered Rick, my best man, leaning in with a sly grin. His hair was slicked back, a stark contrast to his usual disheveled look. "Just the usual wedding jitters, I guess," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. My voice, however, betrayed a tremble. Julia's mom, Mrs. Henderson, caught my eye from the front row. Her look was one of matronly pride, but beneath it, I sensed an iron expectation. My own mother sat beside her, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. They had turned this wedding into their personal project, a spectacle of their making. Then, there she was, Julia. The doors at the back of the church opened, revealing her in a dress that sparkled like morning dew in sunlight. The crowd turned, a collective sigh rippling through the room. She was a vision, but my heart raced for all the wrong reasons. "Here comes your future, buddy," Rick nudged me again, a little too hard. His chuckle was a jarring note in the symphony of reverence. As Julia walked down the aisle, her father beside her, a proud, stoic figure, every step she took felt like a countdown to a life I wasn't sure I wanted. Her eyes met mine, filled with love and certainty, a certainty I envied. "Beautiful, isn't she?" Rick murmured. "Yeah, she is," I managed to reply, my throat dry. The distance between us shrank with each of her steps. My mind raced, memories, doubts, fears all crashing together. The priest's welcoming smile seemed to stretch forever, waiting to seal my fate. I caught a glimpse of Julia's maid of honor, Helen, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She knew. She knew the turmoil inside me. We had shared too many late-night conversations for her not to. Julia finally stood before me, her hand reaching for mine. Her touch was supposed to calm me, but it sent a jolt of panic through my veins. Do you really want this?" I leaned in, whispering so only she could hear. Her eyes widened, a flicker of confusion passing through them. "Yes, of course, I do." "Do you?" I looked at her, then at the crowd, then at Rick, whose expression had turned from amusement to concern. I. The words wouldn't come. The room spun, and for a moment, I thought I would faint. "Matt, you okay?" Rick's voice was a lifeline, but one I wasn't sure I wanted to grasp. The priest cleared his throat, a gentle nudge to proceed. But I stood there, frozen, the weight of the moment, the weight of a lifetime decision bearing down on me. The church, Julia, the expectant eyes, it was all too much. Too much for a decision I wasn't sure was mine anymore. My heart pounded, a drumbeat of impending doom, as I stood at the precipice of a life-altering decision, my next words poised to change everything. The church clock ticked, a relentless metronome against the backdrop of my racing heart. Julia's hand in mine felt both like an anchor and a chain. Her eyes, pools of expectation, searched mine for an answer I couldn't give. "Matt, are you all right?" Julia's voice was a soft melody, laced with concern. The congregation shifted uneasily, a murmur rippling through the crowd. Julia, Words were deserters in the battleground of my mind. I glanced at Rick, his face now etched with worry. "Hey, man, you've got this," Rick whispered, giving my shoulder a reassuring squeeze. But his eyes betrayed his doubt. Around us, the stained glass windows of the church cast a kaleidoscope of colors, a vivid contrast to the gray storm brewing inside me. The priest, an elderly man with a patient smile, nodded encouragingly. "Matthew, we are waiting," he intoned, his voice a gentle nudge in the heavy air. Julia's grip tightened, her nails digging into my palm. "Matthew, please, talk to me. What's wrong?" I looked into her eyes, those beautiful windows to a soul that I feared I might shatter. "Julia, I don't know if I can do this," I confessed, my voice barely above a whisper. The church gasped collectively, a wave of disbelief washing over the room. Julia's face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock. Can't do what, Matthew? Marry me. Her voice cracked, a fragile thread in the tense silence. Julia, I. The words stuck in my throat, a lump of unspoken truths and buried doubts. Rick leaned in, his voice urgent. Matt, think about this. You love her, right? Don't let cold feet ruin your life. Julia's mother stood up, her face a mask of indignation. Matthew, what is the meaning of this? Speak up. My mother's eyes were wide with horror, her hands clasped in a silent prayer. The congregation was a blur, a sea of faces swimming in my vision. I need a moment, just a moment, I stammered, releasing Julia's hand. It felt like letting go of a lifeline. I turned, my legs moving of their own accord. I heard Julia's voice, a desperate plea, Matthew, don't do this. But it was too late. I was walking away, each step a heavy beat in the quiet chaos of the church. The side door beckoned, a gateway to escape. I could hear the whispers, the shocked murmurs, the stifled sobs. But it was all distant, background noise to the roaring in my ears. I pushed the door open, stepping into the blinding sunlight. The cool air hit me like a wave, a stark contrast to the stifling atmosphere I'd left behind. My breaths came in ragged gasps, a man drowning in doubt and fear. I found myself running, my feet pounding against the cobblestone path. The church bells rang, a mocking reminder of the havoc I just wreaked. I didn't look back, couldn't look back. Through the old cemetery, I raced, past tombstones that stood like silent judges. My heart thundered, echoing the chaos of my thoughts. What have I done? I thought, but the question was a stone skipping across the turbulent waters of my conscience. I vaulted over the cemetery fence, landing awkwardly on the other side. The physical pain was a welcome distraction from the turmoil inside. I stumbled through Mr. Johnson's garden, trampling over his prized roses, not caring for the destruction in my wake. The street loomed ahead, a familiar yet alien landscape. My truck was there, a silent, faithful companion amidst the chaos. I fumbled for the keys, my hands shaking, the metal cold against my sweaty palm. As I climbed into the truck, the reality of my actions hit me. I'd walked away from Julia, from a future planned and expected. I'd shattered expectations, broken hearts, including, perhaps, my own. But the decision was made, irrevocable, a path chosen in a moment of overwhelming truth. I started the engine, the rumble a steady drumbeat to the rhythm of my new reality. The road ahead was unclear, the destination unknown, but the journey had begun, a journey away from a life I was supposed to live, towards a life I had yet to discover. The truck's engine hummed beneath me, a steady beat against the cacophony of my thoughts as I drove aimlessly. The road stretched out, a ribbon unwinding through the landscape, each turn taking me further from the church, from Julia, from the life I was supposed to embrace. I couldn't shake the image of Julia's shocked face, the hurt in her eyes. It gnawed at me, a relentless reminder of the pain I had caused. But deep down, a different pain festered, a secret, a truth I had kept buried. My phone buzzed relentlessly, a chorus of calls and messages, each one a demand for an explanation I wasn't ready to give. Ignoring the insistent vibration, I focused on the road, the world outside a blur of green and gray. Finally, I pulled over, the weight of what I needed to do settling on my shoulders like a lead cloak. I took a deep breath and opened my laptop. The screen glowed to life, a portal to the revelation I was about to unleash. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, trembling. This was it, the point of no return. With a heavy heart, I opened the video file, the one that had tormented my conscience for weeks. The first clip started, showing Julia laughing with her friends, the carefree joy of the night before her wedding. It was a stark contrast to the truth that was about to be revealed. I moved to the next clip, my heart pounding. There she was, Julia, in a compromising position with none other than my best friend, Rick. The video was clear, undeniable. The laughter, the closeness, the betrayal, it was all there. The final clip was the hardest to watch. Julia and her maid of honor, Helen, their conversation a muffled whisper beneath the damning visuals. I hesitated, the cursor blinking accusingly. Could I really do this? Expose the truth in the most brutal way possible? But the anger, the sense of betrayal, it pushed me forward. Forgive me, I whispered to no one, my finger pressing the send button. The deed was done. The video, along with a terse message, flew across the digital ether, heading to our friends, family, everyone connected to the wedding. The reaction was immediate. My phone erupted, a volcanic surge of calls and messages. I watched, numb, as the screen lit up with names: Julia's, Rick's, my parents, friends, each one a reminder of the web of lies and truth I had just torn apart. I couldn't answer, couldn't face them. Not yet. I started the truck again and drove on, the landscape a blur, my mind a storm. The phone rang again, this time with Rick's name flashing on the screen. I answered, my voice a hollow shell. Matt, what the hell have you done? Rick's voice was a mix of anger and disbelief. They needed to know, Rick. You. Julia. How could you? My voice broke, the words a mixture of pain and rage. Matt, it's not what you think. Please, let's talk about this, Rick pleaded, but his words fell on deaf ears. No, Rick. There's nothing left to say. I hung up, the finality of the act echoing in the silence of the truck. As I drove, the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the road. My mind replayed the day, the moment at the altar, the decision, the revelation. I had torn down the facade, exposed the lies, but at what cost? I was alone now, on a road leading away from a past too painful to hold on to, yet too significant to fully leave behind. The revelation, though liberating in its truth, left a trail of destruction in its wake. And I, the bearer of that truth, was now a solitary figure, driving into the twilight of an uncertain future. The road ahead was a blur, each mile marker a reminder of the distance I was putting between myself and the life I had just left in shambles. My mind was a whirlwind of emotion, but above all, there was an eerie sense of emptiness, a void where certainty once resided. The fallout of my actions was beginning to take shape, a looming storm on the horizon of my life. My phone, once a mere device, had transformed into a relentless beacon of accusation. Calls and messages flooded in, each tone a sharp jab to my conscience. I glanced at the screen. It was Rick again. His persistence gnawed at me, a relentless reminder of the betrayal. With a deep breath, I answered, Matt, you've unleashed hell. Rick's voice was strained, almost unrecognizable. I had to, Rick. They deserve the truth, I replied, my voice steady but my hands trembling on the wheel. Truth? You've destroyed Julia. And what about us? Our friendship? His words were like bullets, each one hitting its mark. Our friendship died the moment you betrayed me, I said coldly, feeling the final threads of our bond snapping. Before Rick could reply, another call beeped in. It was Mike, another close friend. I switched the call. Matt, man, what did you do? The weddings turned into a war zone. Mike's voice was a mix of disbelief and concern. It's out, Mike. Everything. I couldn't go through with it, not with what I knew, I confessed, the weight of my words pressing down on me. Jesus, Matt, this is. I don't even know what to say, Mike muttered. I ended the call, a sense of isolation wrapping around me like a cold shroud. The road stretched on, a path to nowhere. Suddenly, my phone rang again. This time, it was Julia. My heart skipped a beat. Part of me wanted to ignore the call, to drive away from everything and everyone. But I couldn't. I owed her that much. Matthew, why? Her voice was a broken whisper, each word laced with pain. Julia, I'm sorry. I couldn't pretend, not after what I knew, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What we had, was it all a lie? Her voice cracked, the sound tearing through me. No, Julia. It was real, at least for me. But I saw the videos, with Rick. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Matthew, you don't understand. It wasn't what it looked like. The call ended abruptly, leaving a deafening silence in its wake. Confusion swirled within me, mixing with the remnants of anger and betrayal. What if I had misunderstood? The thought was a small spark in the darkness, quickly extinguished by the overwhelming sense of betrayal. I drove on, the night enveloping the world around me. Streetlights flickered past, each one casting a brief illumination on my solitary journey. I was alone, truly alone, both in the physical sense and in the landscape of my life. The fallout had just begun, a cascade of consequences that I couldn't yet fully comprehend. The revelation had been a moment of truth, but truth, I was beginning to realize, was a double-edged sword, capable of cutting both ways. I turned off the main road, driving aimlessly through the night. The city lights faded behind me, and I found myself on a desolate country road, the darkness a fitting backdrop to the turmoil within. The fallout was just the beginning, the first chapter in a story that had taken an unexpected turn. Where it would lead, I didn't know. All I knew was that the road ahead was uncertain, a journey into the unknown, and I was its lone traveler. The night had wrapped itself around me like a shroud, the darkness mirroring the turmoil within. The road under the truck's tires was a constant companion, its monotonous hum a backdrop to my racing thoughts. I had left the city far behind, the lights dwindling to mere specks in my rearview mirror. The weight of the past few hours hung heavy on me. The phone, once a source of endless notifications, lay silent now, having exhausted its barrage of calls and messages. It was in this solitude that I found myself grappling with the ghosts of decisions made and paths not taken. Suddenly, my phone erupted into life again. The screen flashed my father's name, slicing through the silence. My heart sank. This was a confrontation I couldn't avoid. With a deep breath, I answered, "Matthew, son, what in God's name have you done?" His voice was a mix of anger and disbelief, a father struggling to comprehend his son's actions. "Dad, I found out about Julia and Rick. I couldn't go through with it," I replied, my voice barely steady. "Son, you've caused a storm. You've humiliated yourself, Julia, our families. Was this the only way?" His disappointment was palpable, a heavy weight pressing down on me. I had to be true to myself, Dad. I couldn't live a lie. The words felt inadequate, too simple for the complexity of what I was feeling. There was a pause, heavy and laden with unspoken words. "Your mother is beside herself. And Julia's family, they're demanding answers." "I know, Dad. I know. I need some time to think, to figure things out," I said, a plea for understanding in my voice. "Time is a luxury, son. But remember, we are here. Your mother and I. Despite everything, we are here for you," he said, the anger softening into concern. As the call ended, the finality of my father's words echoed in the cab of the truck. The confrontation with my past wasn't just about Julia or the wedding. It was about who I was and the kind of man I wanted to be. The road ahead stretched into darkness, a metaphor for the path my life had taken. I drove without direction, the night a canvas for my thoughts. Memories of Julia, of our time together, played in my mind like a movie on repeat. The good times, the laughter, the love, all now tainted by the revelation and my subsequent actions. My phone rang again, jarring me from my reverie. It was my mother. The sound of her voice was like a bomb, yet a reminder of the pain I had caused. "Matthew, please come home. We need to talk, to understand," she said, her voice a mixture of sadness and maternal care. "I will, Mom. I just need some time to clear my head," I replied, fighting back the emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. "Be safe, son. We love you, no matter what," she said before hanging up. The road turned, leading me through a dense forest. The trees, like sentinels, lined the path, their branches a silhouette against the starry sky. I felt small, insignificant in the grand scheme of things. My actions, my decisions, had set off a chain of events that I couldn't control or predict. As dawn began to break, the first light creeping over the horizon, I found myself at a crossroads. Literally and figuratively. One road led back to the city, to confrontation and resolution. The other, into the unknown, a chance to escape, to start anew. The confrontation with my past was not just about facing my family or Julia. It was about facing myself, confronting the truths I had ignored and the lies I had lived. The choices I had made had led me here, to this moment, this decision. The sky lightened, a new day dawning, full of possibilities and uncertainties. The past couldn't be changed, but the future was still unwritten. The confrontation with my past was just the beginning, the first step on a journey of self-discovery and redemption. And as the sun rose, casting its golden light on the path ahead, I knew it was time to make a choice, to decide the direction of my life. The first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. I sat there in my truck at the crossroads, the engine idling as a new day beckoned. The night had been long, a journey through memories and regrets, but with the morning light came a sense of clarity. I made a decision. Turning the truck towards the path less traveled, I felt a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was time for a new beginning, a fresh start away from the chaos and pain I had left behind. The road was less defined here, winding through the countryside. Fields of wheat and corn swayed gently in the morning breeze, a peaceful contrast to the storm that had been raging in my heart. I rolled down the window, letting the fresh, crisp air fill the cab, cleansing the remnants of last night's turmoil. As I drove, my mind wandered to the future. It was a blank canvas, an unwritten story waiting to unfold. The possibilities were both exhilarating and daunting. I thought about starting over, maybe in a new town, a new job, a new life. My phone, silent for the last few hours, buzzed with a message. It was from Helen, Julia's maid of honor. "Matt, are you okay? We're all worried." I hesitated, then replied, "I'm fine, Helen. Just need some time. It was the truth, or at least as much of it as I was willing to share. The road took me through small towns, each with its own character and charm. I stopped at a diner in one of these towns, a quaint little place with a sign that read Jenny's Diner. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, a comforting aroma that reminded me of simpler times. I took a seat at the counter, the vinyl stool squeaking under my weight. The waitress, a middle-aged woman with a warm smile, came over. "What can I get you, Hannah?" she asked. "Just coffee, thanks," I replied, my voice rough from lack of sleep. She poured a steaming cup and placed it in front of me. "You look like you've been through a lot. Anything you want to talk about?" Her eyes were kind, inviting. I shook my head, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "Just passing through," I said, though a part of me wanted to spill everything, to share the burden of my story. The coffee was good, strong and bitter, a stark contrast to the sweetness of the morning. I sat there for a while, lost in thought, the chatter of the diner a distant hum. Eventually, I paid and left, thanking the waitress with a small smile. The open road called to me again, a siren song of new beginnings and uncharted futures. As I drove, the sun climbed higher in the sky, its rays warming the land. I felt a sense of freedom, a liberation from the chains of the past. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with challenges and opportunities, but I was ready to face them. The last few days had been a whirlwind of emotion, a tumultuous end to a chapter of my life. But now, as I drove under the wide, open sky, I realized that every ending was also a beginning. This was my chance to start anew, to build a life on my own terms. I didn't know where this road would take me, but I was eager to find out. With each mile, I left the past further behind, stepping into a future that was mine to shape. The journey wouldn't be easy, but it was mine, and that made all the difference. As the landscape changed, rolling hills giving way to open plains, I felt a sense of anticipation, of excitement for what lay ahead. This was my new beginning, a path forged by my own choices, and I was ready to see where it would lead.